What's up, everyone? My name's Grant, and today you're going to watch an interview with me and Ryan Van Duzer. Ryan is so inspirational, has such great energy. I just want to real quickly read off a few of his adventures that he's been on throughout his life. So I'm reading this from his website. He rode a bike 4,000 miles from Honduras to Boulder. He's survived the jungles of Venezuela for a month, ate bugs to stay alive. He says it sucked. You'll hear more about that in this interview. He rode a cruiser bike across the USA, trying to promote bicycle advocacy with the League of American Cyclists, cycled from Maine to Key West, cycled from Vancouver to Cabo San Lucas, cycled across Cuba, cycled from Boulder to Burning Man, and trekked the three passes in Nepal and visited the Everest Base Camp. Here's the thing, he's an amazing adventurer, but more importantly, he's just a good person that wants to inspire people to get out there. And his message is very similar to mine as well. He wants to promote people getting outside, off their couch, outside, experiencing nature, using bikes, using their feet, and just enjoying life. So without further ado, here is Ryan Van Duzer. Here's the first thing I want you to explain to me.
That's what a dance. It's good to dance to start off a conversation with a little movement.
There we go.
Little
There we go.
movement.
We are sitting down right now, so you gotta find a way to stay active. But
Yeah.
okay, you gotta explain to me, what does a termite taste like, and what were the circumstances that led up to you having to survive off of termites in Venezuela?
Well, you probably have never eaten a clod of dirt. Maybe as a kid you did. Put some dirt in your mouth. That's essentially what a termite tastes like. It tastes like you're eating a piece of dirt. The reason why I was eating termites is because I was on a Discovery Channel survival show in the jungles of Venezuela for 30 days, and we needed as much protein and calories as we could get, and termites have a little bit of caloric value. So yeah, there's your answer.
Yeah, really. So I think I was in like fourth grade once, and this mosquito man came into class, and he asked if we all wanted to try fruit flies or something like that. I remember tasting it, and it tasted like star fruit.
Oh
It
wow.
was kind of tasty. So next time you might want to be on the lookout for some flies or some fruit flies, because they taste a little bit better than dirt, but they're extremely tiny. So you're probably getting like zero point 0.1 calorie per
Yeah.
bite. So,
Well,
but
my favorite insect to eat in Venezuela were grub worms. You know, those
okay.
big fat like maggots that live in palm trees, that live in the
Yeah.
bark. Those guys taste like creamed corn, and they're big and juicy. So there's actually
Oh,
some
wow.
caloric value. Yeah.
Wow, but you'd
If any
probably
of the
have to.
listeners out there find themselves surviving, look for grub worms.
Yeah. Well, you gotta do what you gotta do. And you've definitely done some extreme stuff in your life, but also you use biking and adventure just very practically in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And while a lot of the content that you create is extreme, like I said, a lot of the inspiration people can take into their daily lives
Yeah.
in a more, like, I guess, reasonable sense, right? So, you call your bike your freedom machine.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear a little bit more about how you use your bike as a freedom machine, not in Venezuela or across the world, but in your local community, in your hometown of Boulder.
I have loved biking my whole life. Just as most kids do, they get a bike when they're young, and it's such an exciting feeling. And you get the training wheels taken off by your mom or your dad, and you have that sense of freedom and that wind in your hair, and you're ringing your bell. And all of a sudden, you have a tool that can take you further than your feet can and faster. And so, whenever I get on a bike now, I'm 42 years old. I feel the same way I did as when I was a kid with the training wheels being taken off. Just woo! Like life is so good. It doesn't matter if it's hot or cold or whatever the weather is. It feels good to ride a bike. And, I really have embraced it. I've never had a car in my life. I dedicated myself to riding my bike for my whole life. When I was a young kid, I was very environmentally conscious. And I thought to myself, you know what, if I can ride a bike every day for everything, I think that'll be my little piece that I can do to make this environment, a little bit cleaner. And it's fun and it's healthy and you're more connected to your communities. You can wave at your neighbors as you're going by. You can talk. It's, when you're in a car, you're enclosed and you're listening to music, and you're in a bubble that's detached from the surroundings. When you're on a bike, you're there on the street with the people in your community.
Yeah. Yeah, you're out in the open. I've heard this said before that if aliens were to like look down at Earth, they wouldn't think humans were the main organism on the planet. They would actually think cars
Yeah.
were the like predominant organism, because if you look at, the arteries of the planet, our roadways and interstates, you see cars and you see them flying by at 70 miles an hour. And you don't really, you wouldn't at first notice the little ant-sized creatures that us humans are. But you mentioned, I've seen you talk about 15 miles per hour being your favorite speed to experience travel in the Earth. I would say for me at this point, it may be more like 12 or 13 miles an hour, but for you, it's 15. Regardless, that's a lot slower than a car, a lot slower than a plane, a lot slower than a bullet train. So curious what your thoughts are on why that speed is ripe for travel and experience.
Well, I mean, when you go slower, whether you're walking or biking or whatever it is, you feel more. You hear the birds fly by, you hear the gravel crunch under your tires. You just feel more connected to the earth, and it's a very grounding sensation. And for me, 15 miles an hour when I travel, say through Mexico or riding my bike across America, it's just a nice slow speed to really get to know wherever you are. Like, some people think, oh, Kansas must be really boring to ride a bike across because it's flat and windy and blah. Who cares about Kansas? But I've loved my bike trips across Kansas because I'm going 15 miles an hour and I can stop in these little towns where you normally just blow by if you're in a car, and get to know the people at the small diner or the cafe. And that's life at 15 miles an hour is that. It's slow travel, but very purposeful.
And you get to stop too. Like, you can stop on command. It's a lot easier to do so. And you mentioned the people on my trips has always been the one thing that surprised me the most is just how helpful people are. They'll buy you cookies.
Yeah.
They'll ask you to stay at their house. I've never had that happen to me, but I know it happens to a lot of people. But so basically my first experience in bike touring, I was a sophomore in college, broke college student. And I watched this YouTube video of a guy who'd just broken up with his girlfriend, and he was biking from like Alaska to Patagonia or something like that, like something wild.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I need to do my own version of this. So, but I didn't know where to start, and I wasn't a serious cyclist at the time. So I found this bike touring company in New England called River's Edge.
Cool.
They were running tours across Massachusetts, 5-day tours, fully supported. It was like $700 though. So I called up Gary Briere, the host of that, and I just said, hey, Gary, I really can't afford it, but I'd love to come along and, help take photography for the trip and like add value wherever I can. And he said yes. So I was able to do that trip. And first of all, his graciousness to just letting me go was amazing. Yeah. But then also along the way, just the people that I met, they were doing the trip with us. A lot of them were a lot older than me too, 40 or 50 or 60. Yeah. One of the guys that did the trip was 84 years old, and he was doing it with his son and grandson. And that experience for me, I just feel so fortunate that I was able to do it at a young point in my life. I was, I think, 20 or 21. And, I'm going to take that with me my entire life. And the people are really what amazed me. So I'm curious what your first exposure to bike touring was, overnight bike touring was, and kind of the story behind that, and maybe those first lessons you learned that kind of propelled you to where you are now.
So my first bike tour was the biggest one still to this day in my life. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Honduras. I had been living there for 2 years in a small village called La Esperanza. I worked with kids, so I worked in all the schools in the village. And when it came time to go home, the Peace Corps usually just buys you a plane ticket and you fly home, and you're home in a matter of 5 hours. And I thought that would be too fast. I didn't want to go from living in this tiny village to all of a sudden being in Colorado 5 hours later, just reverse culture shock to the max. And so I thought, I want to go home the slow way. And I decided to ride my bike home from Honduras. And it sounded crazy. All my friends and family were worried about me. But for me, I knew that it would be amazing. I spoke Spanish. I love, Honduran people, Guatemalan people, Mexican people. I knew all the places I'd be going through would be so exciting. And yeah, well, like you said, it's the people. The entire way home, 4,000 miles, I met wonderful people who brought me into their homes, who fed me. I met them in markets and small towns and villages. I was this crazy gringo on a bike. Some of these towns I went through in Mexico, they had never had like a foreigner come through, because nobody stops in these tiny towns. They go to the Mexican, resort towns. And so I really got to connect with the people, and I totally just fell in love with the idea of bike travel and moving your body and your mind at a slow pace and feeling the world and meeting people. And it just, lifted me up every single day. I was never scared. I was never in an uncomfortable position. People took care of me. Truck drivers were super cool. Sometimes they'd stop and give me water or help me navigate places. I mean, it was from day one. It was about a 90-day trip. It was the adventure of a lifetime all the way back home to Boulder.
That's unreal. And
Yeah.
that's kind of spur of the moment too. I mean, while everyone else was flying back, you're like, I'm gonna do something different, do something unique. And then look where we are today. Like
Yeah.
I will, in the intro of this podcast, I'll mention some of the trips you've done, but I mean the extent of trips that you've done by bike and by foot are really amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm curious actually if some of your experience in the Peace Corps has kind of related to maybe some of your skills while traveling in bike touring specifically.
Yeah, the Peace Corps for me was a lifelong dream. Maybe not lifelong, but all throughout college, I knew that I would graduate and then I joined the Peace Corps. Service has always been a big component of my life. I've volunteered in my hometown of Boulder with, Latin immigrant kids, and usually in the world of youth development, and I loved it. And I really wanted to give back in a bigger way. And Peace Corps is, it's a 2-year commitment. And yeah, I mean, it was hard. It's not always easy, just like life. And I went from living in Boulder, going to the University of Colorado, where life is pretty darn easy, to tiny village in Honduras, where things were vastly different. Things don't move as fast. Communication is difficult. Some days I don't have electricity. Some days I don't have water. So it really opened up my eyes to how most of the world lives outside of the very rich bubble of Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah, travel is one of those things. I know you are obsessed with travel. A lot of
Yeah.
your life is centered around that. I grew up in Naples, Florida, which
Okay.
generally when I say Naples, Florida, people are like, "Oh, my grandpa lives there." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's right. I probably know your grandpa."
Yeah, I can
And
cut his lawn.
it's exactly right. It's a very unique place. And I'm glad to have gotten out of Naples for
Yeah,
college and then been able to study abroad while I was in college as well, and just experience what the rest of the world is like. I still have much more traveling to do.
yeah.
But you mentioned that you studied abroad in Sweden, right?
Mhm.
For I think when you were 18,
Yep,
and you kind of experienced a different type of bicycling culture there. So you just
absolutely.
talk a little bit about that experience and how it tied
Yeah.
into with the advocacy that you do today.
Yeah, so I'm from Boulder, which is a very bike-friendly city as far as the United States goes. We're kind of one of the leaders. But then I went and lived in Sweden, and it's a totally different world. I mean, they are light years ahead of us as far as just bike culture, bike infrastructure. Their roads are set up for bikes in a safe way. I remember early on in my experience, my Swedish mom would get on her bike every morning and ride to the bakery and get fresh bread and come back to the house. And it was just like, wow, people do just day-to-day errands on their bikes. And also, I was in high school in Sweden, and I remember girls would get all dolled up in mini skirts and makeup and ride bikes to parties. That does not happen in the United States. And if it does, it's a tiny, tiny fraction of people. And so, yeah, people, they don't think of the bike as something that you ditch when you're 16. They very much have incorporated cycling into everyday life from kids through, elderly. And it's for all the reasons that we should be biking. It's good for your health, it's good for the environment, it reduces traffic congestion, and it's just
Mhm.
fun. Biking is fun.
Yeah, period. It's fun. It's just like you talk so much about it, it just makes you happy. It makes you
Yeah.
want to do it, and to be able to look forward to your commute, I think is just it's
Yeah.
something special. Not a lot of people do look forward to their commute.
Yeah.
And so I studied abroad in Prague, Czech Republic. They had really
Cool.
good transit infrastructure, not as much as far as like trains and trams, but
Sorry,
bless
I
you.
didn't mean to sneeze. This is a
I'm glad we're not
horrible
together.
interruption. I think it's gone.
I'd
Okay,
be
I'm not
running out the
allergic
door.
to you, I promise. Okay, we're in Prague.
We're in Prague, and then yeah, so I was able to visit Amsterdam, and
Mm,
my mind was blown by the
yeah,
bike infrastructure there, and I was like, "Wow, they have a different operating system."
yeah,
Their infrastructure, but and their culture too, there was that biking was normal there, and biking was very accepted and not seen something as like an outlier activity.
yeah.
It was normal. So, what I'm curious what your thoughts on and you live in Boulder, which is great for cycling infrastructure. I live in Somerville, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, which recently has really embraced cycling infrastructure too. So, I'm curious though what your thoughts on like what's the importance of infrastructure versus the importance of culture
Mhm.
in biking communities and kind of how they play together.
Yeah, well, the infrastructure is key to making people feel safe. And one of the biggest obstacles to people not riding a bike is because they don't feel safe on the roads. So if we can make our cities safer to begin with, more people will say, okay, I will ride my bike to work now. For example, my mom, she doesn't really ride her bike very often because she doesn't feel safe.
Mhm.
And sometimes you just can't get over it. Even in Boulder, where we have bike lanes and bike paths and protected this and protected that, but it's something that's just hard for some people to get over because it's not part of our DNA. If my mom had been riding a bike since she was 5 all the way till now she's 65, she would have no problem. But there was a huge gap from when she turned 16 and got a car till now, where she has an electric bike now, but she just doesn't feel all that safe on a bike. And so I think going forward in our country, we need to incorporate the European model. And there are a lot of cities now that are finally embracing this and realizing the importance on every level, environment and health, and the health of a city, to have more of the residents biking. We have bike share programs in every major city in the country now. People for Bikes is a large nationwide advocacy group that their specific mission is to make a culture of cycling. And so they work with communities to build protected bike lanes. Those are the lanes where the cars, there's some sort of barrier between you and the car, so you feel a lot safer. And so I think we're getting there, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah, for sure. And you can see I see it here in Boston a lot is there's a lot of aggressive drivers here.
Yeah.
And there's definitely this tension between cyclists and automobiles and oftentimes at the policy level, decision makers kind of feel like maybe they have to choose one or the other.
Yeah.
And I would like to think that there are some ways that we could not that cycling infrastructure could benefit automobile infrastructure and vice versa as well. And so, that's something that I'm very excited about. It requires us to actually communicate with our cities,
Mhm.
to advocate for it. I'm curious in your lifetime, kind of how Boulder has changed as far as their cycling infrastructure, and if what it is today, it's always been like.
I mean, we've always been good and we get better every year. There's always construction programs going on of building straight up bike lanes, and that will go under roads. So you don't ever have to even be on a
Mm,
road in Boulder. You can take bike lanes everywhere, bike paths everywhere, pedestrian paths, whatever you want to call them.
mhm,
And so, yeah, we've really embraced it quite a bit here. But there is always a tension between cyclists and cars. Boulder's right next to the mountains. We have a lot of pro cyclists that train on these mountain roads, and there's not really bike lanes on those roads. And, you know, bikes feel like they have, the right of way. Cars feel like they have the right of way. Cars don't like being slowed down by a cyclist. and it can get messy at times for sure. But that's why you see those signs: share the road. We need to
Yep.
share the road, and that is something, going forward, that is something we're gonna have to deal with, like especially distracted driving. There's so many people on their phones these days while they're driving. They're not even paying attention, and that cyclists are getting hit more than ever. And
Yeah.
so, scary time to be on the road. So we need more of those protected bike lanes.
I'm always trying to pay attention when I'm crossing a street, or if I'm cycling, just seeing if the other driver's engaged and trying to make eye contact with them.
Yeah.
And so often people on their phone. It is really scary to me. Thing is, it's dangerous for them. It's really dangerous for cyclists and pedestrians, because they don't have that same protection.
Yeah. I mean, a car on car accident, there's a chance that you're going to survive. Car on bike, the bike always loses.
Yeah, most of the time. And the thing though is there the number of automobile accidents in the US each year and deaths related to that are absurd. The numbers, I can't quote them off the top of my head. I need to research them more, but we've kind of become immune in a way to the damage and destruction that happens with automobiles and with cars. And while a lot of people perceive cycling as extremely dangerous, cars are also extremely dangerous. So, do you think to some extent we've almost become like we've just accepted the dangers of automobiles and we've just
Yeah.
accepted all these like negatives that come with them?
Yep.
So,
Yeah. We need
yeah,
a paradigm shift. We need people to think, because right now, most Americans, if they go anywhere, they get in their car. That's just automatic. They run out the front door, they grab their keys, they get in their car, and they drive a quarter of a mile to get a burrito, whatever it is. We need to change that to where I'm going to get on my bike. I can do all my errands that are within 5 miles of my house. I don't need my car. And that is the major change that needs to happen.
yeah. So you fetch all your groceries. You
Mhm.
fetch. I mean, you don't have a car. That's one of
No.
the big reasons why we're talking.
Yeah.
You bike, you walk everywhere. Um, can you just talk about maybe some tips and tricks and learnings from you doing that? Like,
Yeah.
how do you make that transition from having a car or yeah, to just doing everything by foot and by bike?
Well, it's been part of my life since day one, so I can't speak to the transition. But it's one of those things where it's a mindset where I have my bike, and my bike, even if it's raining, I'm going to ride my bike, and it's going to be fun because riding our bike is fun, right? Remember to back when we were kids. Um, but it goes back to feeling safe on the roads, and living in a community that actually embraces it. Because if you get on your bike and you ride out your door and you feel like every car on the road is going to hit you, you're probably not going to feel safe on your bike, and you're not going to continue doing it. So we really need to do a lot with making cities safer for cycling. And once that happens, I think people will be like, all right, this is sweet. I'm going to ride my bike. I've lost 10 pounds. I'm feeling better than ever. I'm eating healthier food. It's a chain reaction of good things once you start riding your bike.
Yeah, I noticed you mentioned a stat that the average person loses 13 pounds in their first year by commuting by bike.
Yeah.
That's that's unreal. Because my thing here is that like developing a habit of going to the gym, trying to get in better shape, it's really hard. It's really you have to carve out that time throughout your week
Yeah.
to make that happen, and you've got to show up. But when your only mode of transportation requires you to be physically active and to get a little sweaty, get your heart rate up, like biking or like walking, then you're you have no choice but to practice fitness each and every
Hmm.
week and to
Yeah.
exercise.
Yep.
So, one of the reasons I actually don't have a car is because I can't afford one at this point in my life, and the average cost of a car is about six to $8,000 per year.
Yeah.
If you really look at that and add it up, that's a lot of money. You can do a lot with that in my personal life. And so for me, part of not having a car was out of necessity. But then what I realized is that me walking to the grocery store, walking back uphill was such good fitness, and I didn't
Mhm.
even have to think about it, you know? It was just completely built in. And I've really learned to enjoy it. I'll often have friends be like, "Hey, do you want to ride?" I'm like, "No, I'm just gonna
Yeah,
take the walk. I'm gonna take my choice, take my liberty to go for a walk or go for a bike." And I've learned to enjoy it. So there's this kind of like positive feedback loop that has happened since I've been commuting by foot and by bike. Um, awesome. So I kind of want to talk about your kind of how your career has you've grown and created your own career. I look back on your YouTube and you posted your first video like 16 years ago or something.
yeah.
I think it was the video of you going from
Honduras, Boulder.
Honduras to Boulder. So, do you mind sharing a bit about the start of your journey in
Yeah,
content creation and how how it's led to where you are today?
yeah. So I got a degree in broadcast journalism at the University of Colorado, and that essentially teaches you to be like a local news anchor. And I did an internship at the NBC station in Denver, and it was exciting because it's TV, but it's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell happy stories. You turn on the local news, most of the stories are depressing. I was like, nah, that's not me. I want to share stories that inspire people. And the ride home from Honduras was my first big opportunity to do that. I had a little Sony Handycam. I filmed the whole adventure. I also wrote weekly articles for the local newspaper in Boulder. And when I got home, I edited together a short 5-minute video. And that video actually played on the Travel Channel. And from that moment on, I was like, I want to travel the world and tell stories. I want to inspire viewers. And that's essentially how it all started. And it's a crazy roundabout way of being on Discovery Channel survival shows to making YouTube videos to working for Travel Channel. But when it comes down to it today, my main focus is YouTube, and it is creating content that inspires people to get off their couches. And it doesn't always have to be cycling. It could be walking or running or just going outside and breathing fresh air. And that's really what my mission is just to get people outside, because we live in a world where we're inside of houses, we're inside of office buildings, we're inside of cars, we have earbuds in our ears all the time. We're not very connected to the outside world or the people that we're walking past on the street. But if we can just take those earbuds out, ride our bikes more, walk more, take public transportation, we're connecting more with the people in our communities, and that has so many benefits.
Yeah, and you definitely hit on your mission there because like a week and a half ago, I was watching your Baja Divide trip and
Nice.
I was like, gosh, I need to do this. Like I need I've done some trips like this in the past too, much shorter. Um, but it's like this is really what I want to be doing in life.
Yeah.
But at that moment, I was sitting on the couch watching your video. It's kind of ironic. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, so this video is awesome, but tomorrow I need to go outside and with whatever resources I have, which is my backyard and my own 2 feet,
Yeah.
I need to get outside. And that inspired me. I did this 20-mile hike around this like local reservation that we have in Boston, just outside Boston. And I just left from my doorstep, literally my front doorstep, and walked for like 7 straight hours. And
I love it.
it was great. It was my own backyard too. So
Mhm.
um I'm lucky to have a nice backyard. Boulder, oh my gosh, it's like
Yeah.
such an amazing place too. The flat irons
Yeah.
and the
It's
trails
pretty
around
sweet.
there. Do you have any
Yeah.
favorite spots around there that you like to hit up on like a weekly basis?
Well, yeah. I mean, my house is a quarter mile from all the trails in the foothills, so I'm always running or biking right out that window. But yeah, I love Rocky Mountain National Park. I love the Western Slope, Grand Junction, Fruta. I love Utah, the Moab area. I mean, living out west has a lot of benefits for sure. There's a lot of open space, and it's a great place to just be outside with whatever activity you're doing. And that's, goes back to my mission on my channel, is just to get out there, get outside. You don't have to be an elite athlete. You don't have to be in amazing shape. You can start small, like you walk around your neighborhood, do
Hmm.
that once a day, then go a little bit further and a little bit further, a little bit further. And I guarantee you, you're going to feel better by getting outside. You're never going to go do something like this and be like, yeah, you know what? I really wish I hadn't gone on that walk or gone on that run. It's not how it works. Like it's always a positive thing to clear your mind, just to loosen up your body if you're feeling sore. And who knows what surprises that you're going to find. You might, find the love of your life out there and start up a conversation. Who knows? I mean, there's so many possibilities outside. When you're inside all day watching, working all day and then watching movies all night, which is fine from time to time, magic's not going to happen that way.
Yeah, sure. Wouldn't it be nice to meet your love on the top of a mountain? I mean, like, what a story.
Yeah, I mean,
Is
it can
that
happen.
it could totally happen. And well, what's also awesome too, out west especially, is you got a great community around you that enjoys activities,
Yeah.
like bike touring, like bike packing, like hiking. Definitely have that culture in Boston too. I have a hard time sometimes finding people to go on adventures with. I prefer to do adventures with someone.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you like the solo? Do you
Yeah.
like doing with a group? What's kind
I'm
of your
gonna
thinking behind this?
I'm half and half. I really value my alone time when I'm out on an adventure. I really love it. But I also enjoy, and you've seen in my videos, being with other people from time to time. And it's fun just to ride your bike all day and talk to your buddy and blah 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 blah. For 8 hours, just talk and figure out life and learn from your friends. And so yeah, I'm a half and half there.
Yeah. I feel you go on a hike with someone for 3 or 4 days or a bike trip, and you could not know them at all, and you're
Yeah,
gonna get to know their deepest, darkest secrets if
totally.
they so share, and the stories you hear, the things you learn. It's like you could know someone in your normal everyday life for months and years and never get to know them as well as you do when you go out on an intense trip like that with
True.
them.
Yep.
It's so much fun. I feel grateful to do it. But you've mentioned a few times kind of just going outside, clearing your head, and how it has mental effects. I
Mhm.
think a lot of the time we just focus on the the physical health effects of exercise and out in the outdoors. But I'm curious kind of if you could just expand kind of on how you approach it with mental health and how getting outside just keeps you more steady mentally as well.
Absolutely. And it's all about just connection to yourself, connection to nature, connection to the people around you. And those are like the three big things when you step out your door in whatever capacity it is. And I mean, I could be having a rough day, just bogged down with life and work or whatever. And I can just run for half an hour and feel so much better. Of course, my body physically feels better, but I think the mental aspect of that is a lot stronger for sure. There's something to be said about the medicine of breathing fresh air.
Yeah. It requires you to do it. That's the hard thing is it's an activity, and, once you do it though, it's just like it makes you wanna consistently do it more, and that's why I love walking on a daily basis and just getting outside, and why once you get started, it's so hard to stop. Do you ever bring, like, a journal on your runs or your hikes or your bike trips? Is there any way you kinda, like, other than video that you take notes of how you're feeling or thoughts you've had along the way?
I used to journal a lot more, like every day, but now that I film everything I do, that kind of acts as my journal. But sometimes I will use my cell phone and record audio notes about how
Nice.
I'm feeling and how, what's going on in my mind. So I have a whole log of just random audio recordings, and it's fun to go back and listen to them. So yeah, I think journaling in documentation in whatever form you want to do it is very valuable just to get your brain moving, exercising a little bit, and just for me, I talk a lot about and I write a lot about what I'm grateful for. And when we show gratitude for life and for the world and what we have, it really, again, it has these wonderful mental effects that just make us, just more solid, balanced human beings.
Yeah, there's so much to be grateful for too when you're outside and your blood's pumping. You're like you see a tree and you're like, that is the most special tree I've ever seen in my life. There's something about it that just like expanding. But yeah, so do you have any trips that are coming up that you're planning, or any unique types of like content that you're really focused on right now?
Well, I mean, because of the pandemic, I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to do. I've been wanting to go to Europe for the past 2 years and ride the length of Great Britain, but I don't know if I'll be able to get in this year. So I might stick to local adventures again. And, last summer I did a huge portion of the Great Divide mountain bike route, and I did
Mhm.
go to New Mexico. So I want to finish up New Mexico. I want to ride the Colorado Trail, which is a 500-mile beautiful trail from Durango to Denver. And, I'm always dreaming up new adventures, and we'll see what happens. But specifically right now, what I'm editing actually is a long film of the Honduras to Boulder bike ride. I never really put out anything in a long form. It was just this 5-minute little clip video. And I just found that footage recently. So I'm putting that together, and it's pretty exciting.
What kind of camera was that filmed on?
It was filmed on a Sony Handycam that wasn't even digital. It took tapes. So that was 2005, and it's not HD. It's the 4:3 aspect, so more square than the widescreen. So it's definitely dated, but it's going to be cool. Stay tuned.
That also, yeah, no, that also makes it kind of vintage in a way, and also when you were bike touring before phones and before GPS,
Yeah.
it was a whole different ball of wax. I've never
Oh,
done it without using, like, adventure cycling routes or using Google Maps. How are you navigating during that trip, like, without any of those resources?
I had one map that was a big map, so it was all of Central America and Mexico. And so it's not very detailed, but I had an idea of, okay, I want to go here, and I want to go along the coast, and I'm going to cut inland. And so I used that as the base. And then I just talk to locals all the time. How do I get here? How do I get there? And that's another, great thing about, bike touring is it forces you to interact with people because you need them to help you.
Wait, you mean, like, talking to people that you don't
Talking to
know?
people. Yeah, can you
Oh.
believe it? Well, because nowadays you can have everything on your phone. You don't need to talk to anybody. Your phone can tell you everything you need to know. What's the best restaurant? How do I get here? Blah, 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 blah. And that's great. It's cool. I love technology, but you really miss out on the opportunities to connect with cool humans and maybe your future love. Who knows? Or future best friend.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, I kinda wanna end this conversation just with, your tips to people who might feel a little bit intimidated by bike touring at first, and they're looking to get started with it.
Mhm.
What are some, like, resources or maybe even just mindset that you
Yeah.
need in order to get started and get out there, like, as you'd say?
Get out there. It really starts with the mindset. You have to want to do it, and you have to like want to stick with it. When New Year's comes around, everybody's like, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to get in shape, and it lasts like a couple weeks or a month. I think that's because gyms aren't fun at all. But biking is fun, or running your first 5K or 10K. Um, and so, yeah, it's really just like getting out there and starting it, but also starting small, not overdoing it. You don't want to like get in over your head. You don't want to injure yourself. You don't want to come home and be miserably sore for 3 days every time you go out and do something. So start small and just slowly do more and more and more. Ask your friends. It's a great opportunity to reconnect with friends if they want to go on walks with you or runs with you, and just start there. And if you want to ride your bike across America someday, it's all just about a little bit of training and a lot of heart and just pedaling every day. That's all you do is just pedal. That's a pretty simple task. And the magic will unfold as you go. You'll meet wonderful people. People will invite you into their homes. And before you know it, you've had the time of your life and you're hooked.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, before we wrap up, is there any final parting words of wisdom or last thoughts, maybe a call to action that you want to share with the audience here?
Well, I usually finish my videos with a little get off your couch and get out there. And I know in some cases it's easier said than done. I've always been an athletic person, and for some people it's a real challenge, and they're intimidated because of they don't want to wear the funny bike clothes, or they don't have enough money for a fancy bike. And you really don't need all that at all. Just start small, get out there, and I promise you, you will feel better, and you will continue to feel better every day that you do it and you get outside.
Well, with that being said, of this conversation, I'm gonna go out for a walk real quick.
Woo!
I have to do some tax stuff today,
Oh, fun.
so getting outside is gonna make for, I think, a better experience once I get back to my desk and finish up some tax information. So
Yeah.
I will practice what we preach here. But I really appreciate you taking the time, Ryan, and hopefully everyone got some interesting stories, interesting insights out of this conversation.
You did a great job with this interview, man. I appreciate it, and I wish you the best of luck.